Now that I have begun putting stuff on YouTube again after a long break, the Shai Toy Show is the first thing I put on YouTube for about 7 or 8 months. Um, I'll talk on some other occasion in more detail about the Shai Toy Show. I think, the animation on it is fairly crap, to be honest with you. Don't forget, I did it just for the fun of it, I did it just as a hobby. Where you catch up with them, though, isn't particularly with excellent animation, it's with good sound. And I was very proud of the sound on the Shai Toy Show. Look at the dubbing and the sound and that, and you'll see, I put huge effort more into the sound and the fade ins as the fades out, the mixing of the sound. A lot of the sound effects had to be, the balloon crashing and all of that kind of thing. They had to be composed originally by me, putting together bits from other MP3s. You'd knit them all together. The choral movement things, in other words, particularly the far right song, right, the far right, that took a lot of effort to do because I had to sing that 6 or 7 times in 6 or 7 different silly voices, and then they had to be knitted together, and then it had to be timed, excuse me, along with the piano music that I was using. And then their later song, bop, 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 that had to be done as well. So that's exceedingly time consuming, but if you can get it right, that'll carry you over shitty animation. Because the human eye doesn't take in the shitty animation as much as it takes in the overall story that's being backed up by good sound. So you have your sound right, then you're flying. So yeah, and it was great fun to do. I started the Shai Toy Show shortly before Christmas of last year, after RTE had done the Late Late Show, the Late Late Toy Show with Tubridy and a disabled child who they took advantage of to promote the vaccines. So there's a serious message there. More on that in another. I'll talk about it more in another video. I'll put up some of the crude drafts and some of the stuff that didn't get out on the final one. I'll put up some stuff there. We can have a talk about it. But I'm using the YouTube branding in this video. You might notice I'm not using the Odysee card. So this is primarily a YouTube video. But when our cat lady Tenny Soy Bohemian friends get their hands on this, it'll be backed up on Odysee. You can do an automatic Odysee backup of all your YouTube stuff, but it takes ages. It takes about 10 days to do. So I'm not going to do that. What I do is I just put another copy of it on Odysee. I did that with the Shai Toy Show. Odysee being what it is, those like the YouTube copy of the Shai Toy Show was 16.5 gigabytes. The one file was 16.5 gigabytes for YouTube, because that's in 4K on YouTube. It's on like about 1K on Odysee. And again, somebody actually, Ivor Smakovsky on Twitter, I was very flattered to see, he mentioned my analogy of, the further reaches of the internet, Odysee and BitChute and all the Rumble, as being the equivalent, the 2021 equivalent of 1970s Radio Caroline out in the high seas, putting on, they went by long wave, pirate radio did, so the sound was diabolical, and, the bandwidth and navigation of Odysee is diabolical. Odyssee's not very good, but it's not very good in terms of its kind of robustness and the strength and power of it as a platform. In terms of its censoriousness, it's brilliant, because it lets you say what you like. But, it's a platform, it's not a publisher, and it's really good, and I appreciate Odysee hugely. But it is Radio Caroline, and I'm glad people kind of grasped my comparison there. What we're doing out there is like pirate radio. I'm in another 30-day ban on Facebook. Like they're out to get us, and we can accept now that Facebook and YouTube are a little more than the RTE player in terms of being main. Well, they're fucking easier to use and better than the RTE player. I mean, an old Betamax video player is better than the RTE player, but in terms of them being conventional mainstream, they are as much conventional mainstream now as RTE is, really. So you put the stuff up on YouTube, a few people might listen to it, but everybody is migrating away from YouTube to other platforms such as BitChute, Odysee, Rumble, and so on. And, that's what the internet's about, and we'll keep migrating, and they won't shut us down. Fine Gael are going on with all their usual bullshit. I saw actually a Social Democrats TD today, some blade in the Social Democrats said, should there be fines? She's proposing a bill now to fine people who leave their engines running. Somebody voted her in. Somebody voted her in, you know. We're in a vacuum at the moment. All of our mainstream political parties are shit. Fine Gael are fascists. Fianna Fáil have just lost the plot altogether. Sinn Féin are kind of global nihilistic pity point fascists who have a history of terrorism. The Greens are just pedo-fascists, you know, doing the eco thing a little bit. Labour are just pure woke. The Social Democrats... What's the fucking purpose of the Social Democrats? I think they're just people who couldn't get on with the other cunts in Labour. You know, what's the point? So we have a vacuum. And somebody had a tweet saying, you know, if it wasn't for 24/7 propaganda, censorship, and the threat of criminal prosecution, then we would be dominating, our position would be dominating everywhere. It's only the lies and the government control that's keeping the present woke narrative going. Nobody likes, you know, normal people out there, they don't like woke. I talk to them and I tell them my position on the transgender thing, which I'm not willing to say here on YouTube because it would get me taken down. And I tell them, and I haven't met one person who says to me, oh no, gender is a construct. You know, where is this coming from? Yet, you know, we have the same heads from Tenny. There's one individual from Tenny who's a baddie, a woman, a real woman, a baddie, who, you know, and she's always getting an RTE. She's always getting an RTE. What is this? What's going on here? You know? But yesterday there was a protest outside a property owned by Varadkar. Yeah, anyway, sorry, just to get back to my last point. I'm using the YouTube branding here, but you can know everything will be backed up on Odysee. Anyway, there was a protest yesterday outside some property owned by Varadkar. And yesterday, Sunday the 19th of September. And it was ostensibly done by people who were complaining about the woke agenda and complaining about the lockdown and complaining about the coronavirus and all of that. That protest was let happen, right? I want you to be very clear about that. Although if you're listening to me, then you already probably are on my page with that. And here's you know, I'll digress slightly. How do we get our message out beyond us? We're on our way, we're very much on our way, and we will win, but we need to look forward now and start thinking, particularly in the light of yesterday, how we're going to get our message out more strongly. What do you do? Do you do tweets? Do you have troll tweet account? What do you do? But anyway, there was a protest outside Varadkar's, and their, you know, remarks are made, and people held up banners and that kind of thing. They're NPCs. Right? They're NPCs singing a different tune from the woke NPCs, you know, who are saying, oh, leave us and stay safe. Like Andrew Flood, in terms of woke NPC on the Corona hoax shit, Andrew Flood is the preserve and formaldehyde example for students. But these people are the same. The ones who are outside Varadkar's house are the same. They're just singing a different tune. But the software is the same. The software is the same. They're just singing a different tune. Thomas Sheridan and myself have for a long time said, don't go to protests. These are achieving nothing. Because the only protest that's worth going to is the type that they will not tolerate or allow. And if they won't tolerate it or allow it, then it could end up like Bloody Sunday 1972. And you don't want that. And I'm not saying there was any disrespect to the people murdered on Bloody Sunday 1972. Not in the slightest. But the question is this, are you trying to score points just to stay alive? To what extent? Okay, right. And Thomas Sheridan in his video yesterday was saying, you know, I think Bob Marley or some reggae singer said it as well, I'd rather be a free man in the grave than spend my life as a puppet or a slave. Oh, bloody sure. Yeah, me too. But then you don't unnecessarily put yourself at risk. Once you've made up your mind, then you work out what your compromises are and are not going to be. So, for example, August of 2020, the start of August 2020, I said, right, my compromise, my red line is the masks. Under no circumstances am I wearing a mask at all, ever. And I don't care what happens. But then once I made my mind up about that, you see, there's a paradox to an extent. You then start playing it carefully to make sure that you don't get into trouble, while you don't compromise. While you don't compromise, you then look at how you can work the system. and look at the legislation and look at how you might be prosecuted for not wearing a mask. And, look, it's what any barrister will tell you. Don't look for what they have in, look for what they leave out. And what did they leave out? They left out the burden of proof. Any senior counsel will tell you that. If you want to get the hook on something, don't look for what they've left in, look for what they've left out. So they left out that a person has to get a medical certificate for their exemptions. In other words, if that, senior counsel immediately will say to you, oh, that means that you have to be taken on your word. So what I did with all the shops was, I've explained this ad nauseum. I just said I'd like permission to attend, I'm claiming my exemptions. It worked. So that's not to suggest that I'm a toady. It's to suggest that having made my decision simply not to wear a mask, I then decided that I would do everything else possible to not get into trouble. Right? It doesn't mean that I've compromised. By not ever wearing a mask, that's my protest. And people have seen me now for a year and over a month going around the shops not wearing a mask. 13 and a half months I have not worn a mask once in any shop. I've worn that leather mask. Actually, I tell a lie. I wore that leather mask for those photo shoots. And just for the wind-up, I wore it into Liffey Valley, wearing the full leather suit, the leather jeans and the leather jacket and the leather hat and the leather gloves. And I wore the leather mask on me and I couldn't breathe after 5 minutes. So I was in a particular shop, I was in Curry's, and I said to a member of staff, I'm taking this off now, I can't breathe. It's as simple as that. And that's all right, they said. So that big holy leather mask I just wore for a wind-up in Liffey Valley. But other than that, I chose to wear that particular leather mask just for the crack. Other than that, I have not worn a mask once. Except actually on another occasion in my office here, I put a mask on for half an hour to see what it would be like. In the privacy of my office, it stank afterwards. It stank for a day afterwards, the mask did. I can only imagine other people. Okay, I'm not exactly pristine down there, but having said that, there's other people who are bloody worse. I don't have tooth decay, believe it or not. So, But anyway, this protest outside Varadkar's, there was the immediate response in of course, the Irish Times and RTE. It's the Four Reich. The Four Reich are back again. And this is why you must understand that those mainstream media journalists were tipped off about it. They knew this was coming. They had the articles ready. And the Fine Gaelers, of course, are all saying, this is what happens in their learned voice. Some Jennifer something or other in the Irish Times. Aren't I very intelligent? This is the net result of people spreading hatred online. No, it's not. This is a crowd of Egypts outside Varadkar's property. I don't think it is his actual permanent house. I think it's a property he owns somewhere. By the looks of it, it looks like Phibsborough. I don't actually think it was his full-time permanent residence. I think he lives somewhere in Dublin 15. I'm not interested. I'm not going to be protesting outside his house. Thomas Sheridan has analysed it sharply. These protests are begging your rulers. With the coffee meetings that Thomas inspired, and that's developing a hell of a lot of momentum. With that coffee, I'm seeing the Triscoll appear all over the place. With those coffee meetings, that is taking the resistance underground, and that's scaring the shit out of them. They want you to come to these protests outside Varadkar's house. Do you not understand? That protest was let happen. There were 2 Gardaí in the steps at Varadkar's house. They would have closed the street if they didn't want the protest to happen, you fucking dummies. But they are dummies. In 2014, I declared war on the pseudo-lawyers, the free men on the land, because they were doing exactly precisely to the button what we witnessed yesterday outside Varadkar's property. What they were doing, single-handedly and in one short go, was destroying the credibility of the resistance. Irish Water, I don't know what happened really with Irish Water in 2014, but it struck a chord. I think it may have been an interview on RTE. Don't forget, John Williams wasn't running news and current affairs in RTE at the time. RTE was a lot more independent in 2014 than it is now. RTE has changed significantly since Williams took over. There was an interview with John Tierney, the head of Irish Water, in which he was being asked how they had managed to spend €85 million on consultants. And the word consultants and the obscene sum of money, not €8.5 million, 85 million. Michael O'Leary from Ryanair said, we've never spent 85 million on anything. They don't even spend that on, their jet planes would cost 30 million or something for Ryanair. And that was where the establishment, particularly the Fine Gael establishment, they're the most corrupt establishment in the country, Fine Gael are. They're streets ahead. In terms of venality and corruption, they're incomparable. They're incomparable. Don't think of Fianna Fáil are that bad. They're not. Fianna Fáil got the bad press. It's Fine Gael who are the scumbags. John Tierney was asked, how did you manage to spend €85 million on consultants? And he came out with the pure psychopath's reply. Oh, all of the procurement was done by public tender. Sorry, you fucking lizard. That's not what you were asked. And of course, the RTE interviewer didn't turn the screws on him. That's when, you see, that's the RTE thing again. But at least enough people heard that interview. It was O'Rourke, I think. Sean O'Rourke. And Sean O'Rourke did an interview some years later with Varadkar, and people were saying it was scandalously sycophantic. But that's RTE. What O'Rourke should have said was, you're not answering my question. But you're not allowed to do that because you've got to be polite to these people. It's the politeness that'll be the ruin of the Irish people. The Americans, one of the things I like about the Americans is that they're not afraid. There's a certain element in the US that's not afraid to get politicians and hold them up to the wall, metaphorically, pin them up to the wall by the scruff of their neck, metaphorically, and say, what the fuck are you doing? We elect you. There's much more in America of a Republican attitude, a genuinely Republican attitude, where they're saying, hang on, you answer to us. Or at least you answer to the state. In Ireland, no, they're in love with their politicians and, all these NGO scumbags. And okay, right, it'll be to their ruin. And it is. We're seeing it now. We're seeing it more sharply as every day goes past. But with Irish Water, a grassroots protest movement got started. And it scared the shit out of Fine Gael. I remember. I do have a memory. I'm not a normie. I'm not an NPC. I have a memory. I remember 2014. And then Direct Democracy Ireland came in the scene. And Direct Democracy Ireland was advising people to get any of their packages from Irish Water and to send them back to Irish Water with no contract, no consent, return to sender written on them. And I was saying to these people, if you do that, you're proving to Irish Water that it came. So by doing that, you are signing up to Irish Water. And these half-wit, inbred, drogheda dirtbirds were undermining the boycott by doing that. This is what we saw yesterday. Now, enough people were wise enough to just throw out or to bin their Irish Water starter packs. But some people did write no contract, no consent. And I don't have an international treaty with you. They're all this fucking illiterate shit they write. And they write it in spastic handwriting as well. And sent them back to Irish Water. Then they started getting bills. How did this happen, they said. And Direct Democracy Ireland are saying to them, oh, but contract law applies here. And I answered Direct Democracy Ireland and I said, contract law does not apply here. Why does it not apply here? Because statute always trumps contract, right? So, if there's a statutory obligation, for example, to pay the toll of the toll road that you drive over, all those toll roads are set in statute. You drive over a toll road, there is a specific act of the Oireachtas that says that you're obliged to pay a fee for that, right? So when people turn around and then say, show me the contract. I remember one cunt saying that. Show me the contract. I said to him, you're a cunt. I'll get your mirror, I'll show you the cunt. I said, you're just a cunt. I said, you're just a cunt. I remember, they always have this retard smile on their faces. Fella goes into court. Huh? Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'll have another pint again. Sorry, yeah. Come here. No, you answer me this. Answer me this. Fella, fella drives over the toll bridge, right? Huh? Huh? Yeah, he drives over the toll bridge. And he gets summons to go into court over the toll bridge. And he goes into court, he turns to the judge, and he says, show me the contract. Well, I tell you, I said to that man, I said to him, I know what happened there. He got a fine of 15,000. I didn't hear that. Well, I said, you're a moron anyway, aren't you? And everyone knows you're a fucking moron. You're fucking simpleton talking to these fucking barfly fucking lawyers, armchair lawyers down the pub. You know? That's pure armchair lawyer shit. Show me the contract. You know, and there's no point in even explaining to these simpletons, to these fucking simpletons, that if an act of the Oireachtas is passed that says that you have a legal obligation to pay a bill for such and such a thing, then that's not contract law. That's a specific statutory obligation which stands in its own right. So contract law doesn't apply at all. Show me your contract. So Direct Democracy Ireland and those other fucking inbred half-wits were saying to people, you don't have to pay your Irish water bill because it's contract law. And I mean, they wrote this shit. They wrote it. It was illiterate, the stuff they were writing. No, I'd rather listen to a solicitor. Because a person in their first week of law school will tell you that statute trumps contract all the time. Then, of course, a lot of them had the software breakdown and ended up being fined. But then some of them, where the software was slightly more sophisticated, said, but the statute is unconstitutional. No, it's not. All statute that's passed in Ireland is presumed to be constitutional until somebody manages to convince the High Court that it is unconstitutional and the High Court strikes it down. Right? That's called the presumption of constitutionality. Now that is, go around Drogheda and say presumption of constitutionality and see it'll happen. Okay? But that is the presumption of constitutionality. That's what that is. So all statute and anything that stems from statute, statutory instruments of the minister, that kind of thing, they all have a presumption of constitutionality until you manage to go into the High Court and convince the High Court otherwise. And to do that, by the way, you have to have the Attorney General on notice. I learned that lesson the hard way. I won't even say. But, you cannot just say, well, it's unconstitutional, so I can ignore it. You can't ignore it. Oh, well, you can ignore it, but you'll pay the price for ignoring it, usually. Although everything's collapsing around us at the moment anyway. So the problem, nothing's holding together. It's what W.B. Yeats said, the centre cannot hold. He's right. A terrible beauty is being born. Maybe it is, I haven't seen it yet. But anyway, rather than terrible beauty being born, we'd all these scobies on the steps of Varadkar's property yesterday. And then, of course, all the woke media was saying, the homophobic attack on Varadkar. They're using words like homophobic attack, and this is why we must have legislation to deal with hate speech online. Oh, you could write the script for them. I could write it for them, but I'd be better at it. This is interesting, though. This is interesting, and we're now at 25 minutes here. I've waffled a bit. But what I noticed was that even the normies, even the woke normies, are turning on RTE and the Irish Times for this. Even the likes of fucking establishment satire, inverted commas, like Waterford Whispers and, some of the other ones, Dr. Harold News, the rest of them. They're all wokester, They're even saying, oh, fuck you. The fact that a crowd of fucking idiots do a protest that they were let do outside Varadkar's house does not mean that we now have to start allowing Fine Gael or some woke NGOs to censor the internet. No, sorry, you're showing your hand, you cunts. That's very significant. I've said before, and this is my own analysis, it's not Thomas's analysis or anybody else's, it's my own. There are 4 distinct groups: psychopath, NPC, normie, sentient. It's entirely exclusively my own categorization. Forget about the psychopaths, forget about the NPCs, because the NPCs aren't necessarily psychopaths, but they're just these empty vessels the psychopaths work through. Although the psychopaths are empty vessels themselves. But it's all to play for the normies. It's all to play. So in the short term, we would say, well, that protest outside Varadkar's property, it handed a big victory to Varadkar and to Artie, and that, no, it didn't. It didn't, because the normies were looking at this immediate, stage-managed, pearl-clutching response from the woke mainstream media. Oh, it's the homophobic attacks on Varadkar. And right enough, some of those simpletons on the steps of the place did make homophobic, or not even. No, they didn't. What's a homophobic remark? A homophobic remark is, I want to call to Christian Morris's house and burn it down with him inside because he's a queer. That would be a homophobic remark. Or, I believe that because Christian Morris is attracted to other men, he's a paedophile. That would be a homophobic remark. Would, I believe, what's the difference between a fridge and Christian Morris? A fridge doesn't fart when you take your cock out of it. Or when you take your meat out. Sorry, I got the joke wrong. What's the difference between a fridge and Christian Morris? A fridge doesn't fart when you pull your meat out of it. Oldies are goldies. I remember hearing that in school first. We all roared laughing. And that's not homophobic. Believe it or not, that's not homophobic. First of all, it's not defamatory, because I won't talk about gay sex. No, it's YouTube, sorry. It's not Odysee. But it's not homophobic. Making scatological or vulgar remarks about gay men, frilly knickers, that's not homophobic, guys. Sorry. Helen McEntee, that dumb little agricultural bitch who's she's off doing something now, but there's some other cows in place instead of her. Oh, it's homophobic. Varadkar is saying it's homophobic as well. Varadkar will say whatever he has to say. Neither is it homophobic to question Roderick O'Gorman about his association with Peter Tatchell, a man who promoted the paedophile information exchange. That's not homophobic either, right? Okay. But remarks about the nature of gay sex, although they're very vulgar, they're not homophobic, right? Saying that black people have black skin is not racist. Same thing. We're talking about the reality of homosexuality and homosexual sex. I am homosexual. Literally, I am sexualized towards homos, towards homo sapiens, not towards women. So, homosexual sex doesn't just involve watching reruns of the Eurovision Song Contest. It does involve us doing things to one another. It can also be very funny. It would be nice. I remember a time saying to myself, I was getting to know by first name the accident and emergency staff, but this is when you're learning how it works. You have to learn the physics of sex. Jesus, I learnt. I'm lucky I had my anatomy left together in one piece after it all. But, hey, it's not so, like, we don't have vaginas, and it's more difficult to do things. And that's, I won't go into more details. But these are the realities of it. All we're doing is recounting reality. So for them to make, and they made, these guys made vulgar jokes about Varadkar and his partner. That's not homophobic, right? It's slagging. It's only slagging. Look at the Shai show. A lot of that was only slagging. Most of it was, sorry, disclaimer. It was all only slagging. Okay, there we go. Everything in the Shai show was only slagging. That's not homophobic. And it's fascinating to see how even the normies are saying, no, fuck you, we've had enough of your crap now. We've had enough of the Irish Times, you're race baiting all the time, telling people who are so hard pressed for paying their taxes, and that, as that eye-swiveling cretin Ryan is talking about more taxes. No more railways, no better energy infrastructure, more wind farms, more lecturing by a Swedish retard, more taxes. No, sorry, we're having enough of this. It's very interesting. And then Varadkar, Forrest Gump and the Rain Man. Varadkar put up a tweet wishing the best of luck to everybody going back to work for the first time after 18 months. Oh, stop. And they were all saying to him, some of us never stopped work, or in your case, some of us never started. you know. And then you look at the Twitter, like Twitter's a terribly, terribly relevant medium, and how, you know, one or two morons are coming up with Leo's Allege, and they're being piled. Oh, this is the pile on. No, people are just responding to your fucking idiotic remarks. That's not a pile on. People are allowed to respond. So there is. I don't like the term an awakening. That's too truther. The truthers are NPCs. The same as the wokies. They're all the same. And these ones outside Varadkar's property were NPCs. But it's interesting to see how this protest movement is deteriorating. The yellow vest. Oh, we'll have the peaceful protest. Come here. We went into the peaceful protest. Does your man with the tap in his head go by? The tap in his head. You're the fella with the big the dreadlocks, huh? Yeah, Margaret, I'll have a sandwich, yeah, huh? Is there mate in it? Yeah, there's a cheese. Cheese and mate, yeah. And is there any egg? Egg, I'll have a sandwich, Margaret, huh? Yeah, yeah, I'll have egg and cheese. And there's a bit of mate that'd be nice as well, huh? Yeah. Oh, but anyway, listen, come here. We went to. Is there any cake? Is there any cake? Oh, Margaret, you'd lovely cake by the Esther. The Esther cake, Margaret, was lovely. It was lovely, Margaret, the Esther cake. Anyway, come here. We went into the protest. Ah, it was great. It was good. There was face painting for the chiselers, huh? It was, yeah. There was face painting for the kids. But the best part, wait till I tell you what the best part of it. Yeah, I'll have to one with the egg. Yeah, the egg. Over there beside the cake. Yeah. Oh, no, it was great though. There was the face painting. There was the face painting, but also, no, it was great. It was your man with the bongos, huh? Yeah, your man with the bongos. But the best part, wait till I tell you, there was your man with the tap. He had a tap in his head. He did. No, I did. I swear to on the Holy Spirit, there was a go boy there, the tap. Yeah. Yeah, and we all sang a song on the way in the bus back to Clontarf, huh? Yeah. Etc. You know, so these yellow vest protests are failing. They're failing by numbers, but they're failing with. So there was your man Dara, I think that's his name, given out to the guards because they were checking his suitcase for weapons. You know, and he's quite a turbulent individual, shall we say? You know, you don't want these fuckers around you. Thomas is right, and it's what I said since 2014. When I saw them doing no contract, no consent, return to sender, I said, right, I will operate on my own rather than unite with any or be associated even implicitly by default or by silence. Will I be associated with these kind of people? I remember one stupid bitch on Facebook said to a good friend of mine, I've met this particular person, don't associate with Christian Morris. He ate her up back for that. He said, do not ever tell me who I can or cannot associate with. Christians supported us very heavily in the Irish water protest. Because I did actually. I gave the genuine Irish water people, I gave them a lot of support, and I still do, and I don't regret that. I was right to do that. He said, you know, don't you ever tell me who I can or cannot associate with. Oh, I didn't mean it that way. You did, he said. I was really impressed at how much I didn't say a word on this particular thread, how much he bit her off for it. And you see, people know something about me. As much as I might be rude to people, as much as I might tell them to fuck off, as much as I might be vituperative, as much as I might be, you know, acerbic, people know I'm honest. And people know that I place great stead in accuracy. And I'm the first to criticise RTE for their lies. And the Examiner, the Irish Examiner, fucking toilet paper rag, the Examiner. So if I believe the person who needs to be held to the highest standard of accuracy is myself. Because that's the one thing I can control, isn't it? So people know about me. You may not like me. You may say my breath stinks. You may not like the stuff I come out with. But there's very, very few people, if any, have ever accused me of being insincere or of being a hypocrite. That's okay. That's good enough. That'll do. Because I'll just keep, ploughing on the way I do. I take my court cases, I do my social media stuff, etc. I do remember, though, your man carried on at her. He kept on the thread. No, he said, we disagree, Christian and I disagree on But, he's been great support in XYZ and ABC. He's put up lots of good stuff about us. He's come to court for us on a number of occasions, etc. Then she wrote, "Oh, well, I didn't mean it that way." "You did," he said. And she replied, "I didn't mean it that way, but we all must..." She started then, you heard the soundtrack, the loop kick in. "We all must unite." Oh, fuck off, you stupid bitch. I don't unite with losers. It's like Thomas. Nobody would tell Thomas what he could or could not say. Same with me. Nobody's going to dictate to us about what we can or cannot say. I do not ever tell any other content creator what they should do. Sometimes content creators will swap material and say, "Hey, did you see this? Or did you see that?" But the idea that I would stand in judgment over another content creator, no, it's not going to happen. And if another content creator goes silent for some time and doesn't put material up, or even blocks me, or doesn't want any more contact with me, that's the anarchy of what we're doing here. We're not under one management. We're not under one narrative here. We're all independent. So somebody may decide not to put up any more content for the rest of their life. Okay. Thomas Sheridan may not post anything again for the rest of his life. Theoretically, I think it's unlikely. But he may decide to do nothing more. That's his business. I'm not going to be dictating to him or judging him for whatever he says. If he ever says anything that might be factually inaccurate, yeah, I would politely just say, well, that was factually inaccurate because... But it's not my position to be a critic of his or any other content creator. That is the feature of the freedom of what we have. We're doing our own thing. You can take it or you can leave it. This is exactly what he says. It's what I say. You don't have to agree with me here. You don't have to listen. It's one of the reasons why I close comments. Because, you just have the same fucking losers coming out with shit. You have the same... I'm not paid for this shit. I'm not paid for this shit. But the yellow vest movement is deteriorating. That's for a reason. People are getting wise to this. This is now turning seriously interesting. And if you compare this country now in 2021 to what it was in 2011, or particularly 2009 when Brian Cowan was in, it's a very different place now. And there is a certain middle class in Ireland who I think will go down with the Needlecraft and their beloved politicians and newsreaders and RTE. But I'm very interested at the response today. The general, and to summarise it, the general response among the normies was a small fringe group of wackadoodles did a stupid little demonstration on the steps of a property owned by Varadkar. I was the only one who kind of said, well, they were let do that, which they were. But that sense is prevalent among them. They're suspicious. What the fuck is really going on here? Why was that allowed? And let's talk now about McCarran in Letterkenny. What happened there? Answer, I don't know. Never be afraid to, Terry Prone wrote 2 really good books actually in the 1990s, the early 1990s, Write and Get Paid for It, and Get That Job. And I took a lot of advice out of those books, and I ended up writing and getting paid for it because of Terry Prone. And I ended up getting jobs because of Terry Prone. If I ever met her, I'd thank her for those 2 books. I remember meeting another independent content creator. We both said, Jesus, Terry Prone's books are great. They were very commonsensical, they were very blunt and to the point, but they carried an awful lot of substantial common sense advice for somebody who, I was 18 or 19 at the time, was great advice by Terry Prone. Now she's a total shill. Maybe she was then. I don't know. But in the book Get That Job, Terry Prone said, Prone's precept, if you're at a job interview and you're asked a question and you don't know the answer to it, you have 2 options, and you have only 2 options. You can say you don't know, or you can prove you don't know. That stuck with me. I thought that was really good, actually. So we're looking at this thing in Letterkenny, and there's no shame for any of us at least us independent content creators, to say we don't know what happened. There was an article in the Irish Times, today about it. The man's family made a statement. Oh, his family. Right. I wonder about that thing in Letterkenny. There was a video, a very convenient video online, and they were talking about Dolores Cahill. Yet Cahill wasn't there. So in other words, what I divined quite quickly from looking at it wasn't that Dolores Cahill herself actually was telling people in that specific instance. I don't believe that in that specific instance Cahill was giving advice. I believe that those people were citing Cahill as a source of inspiration. That's a different thing. It's a different thing. Again, it's like that film The Mist, and here comes a plot spoiler. The worst, the most confusing, discombobulating part of it is just before it's about to get better. Now, I don't think it's just about to get better. Sorry to be pessimistic, I suppose. I think things are going to get a lot worse. I may be wrong, I hope I am. But people may be still kidding themselves like 1940 or 1914. It'll all be over by Christmas. Don't be getting into that mindset. John Carpenter did a number of really good films, and he did a film, Escape from New York. And there is a distinctly B-movie shtick off a lot of his stuff. He did a film, The Fog. And Adrienne Barbeau was in both of those films, Escape from New York and earlier on, The Fog. And she was a DJ. Here's a plot spoiler again. Everything now henceforth in this talk is plot spoiling. And she said, at one point, there's something in the fog. There's something in the fog. And I do think that may have inspired Stephen King when he wrote The Mist. It's a rubbish short story, very poorly written. The film was really good. It's interesting, the distinction between the film of The Mist and the book. In the book, Mrs. Carmody was an old woman. In the film, she was in her mid to late 30s. That was a very interesting casting choice, and it was a good one. The actress that they used in The Mist, the actress in the film of The Mist, was Marcia Gay Harden. And in the film, she was in her mid to late 40s, but she looked younger. And it's interesting how her face even and her whole performance made a big impression on people. She was very good. I thought she was an excellent casting choice for that. An excellent casting choice. Whereas in the short story, Mrs. Carmody was an old woman. But anyway, getting back to John Carpenter and The Fog, the woman in the lighthouse said, there's something in the fog. And then there was Escape from New York. And at the end of Escape from New York, Fliskin saves the president's life. And as soon as he gets the president back to, now we have to admit, plus spoiler, the president actually at one point saved Fliskin's life. Because Fliskin was being surrounded by people and the president shot them dead. So the president did a favour for Fliskin. But once the president was home and dry, he turned into the standard they live type politician. And this was carried on then about 6 years later by Carpenter in the film They Live. It's the pure politician. As soon as they've got what they want, they're not interested in you. They're not interested in you in person. That's the difference with Trump. Trump was interested in people. But what's happening with Needlecraft and Rona? There's something out there. What is it? We don't know. What we do know is that the decisions in all of this regard are being made elsewhere. They're not being made by anyone in the island of Ireland. There are many, many other things I could say. Roderick O'Gorman and Peter Tatchell, look closer at that. That's all I'd say. Really, look closer at Roderick O'Gorman and Peter Tatchell. I could say a lot more. But, they live, and there's something out there. What's happening with Rona? Well, I have my own theory about it, and I've said it on Odysee. But I do think it's about making the Georgia Guidestones develop a bit of authenticity. Right? Because we're on YouTube here, aren't we? as I said, they're not a cattle grid. And I'll leave it at that.